Sandman is one of the best graphic novels ever written, and this year Netflix's adaptation of it is going to come out. If you want to know a bit more about it, or know why you should read it before the show comes out, or maybe you just want to be cool and know some stuff about it before everyone talks about it, well, you've come to the right place. Sandman is a graphic novel series spanning 10 volumes written by Neil Gaiman in collaboration with many artists over the years. The ones who worked on this first chapter are Sam Keith, Michael Dringenberg, Malcolm Jones III, Daniel Fozzo, and Todd Klein, with Dave McKean doing the original covers for all the volumes. The first volume is about the titular character Sandman, or Morpheus, or Dream. No, not that one, who is one of the Endless, who are like a dysfunctional family of 7 personifications of different aspects of life that starts with D, like dream, death, destruction, etc. On Earth, there is this like magician or occultist, whatever you want to call him, that attempts to summon death and imprison her so he could make her do what he wants, like make himself immortal for example. But something went wrong and he summoned Death's younger brother Dream instead. I think that is one hell of a premise, especially considering when it came out. It definitely made me want to know more, and already that is one good thing about this volume. Before I get into the rest of the good things, I want to go over the things that didn't work for me first. There's really only one or two, which is the fact that this is the first volume of Sandman, and let me explain. So this volume, Preludes and Nocturnes, is easily the weakest volume of Sandman, and the fact that it's the first volume is mostly why. In a lot of places, it feels like it's still trying to find its footing, or just trying to find out what Sandman is supposed to be. One example of this is all of the cameos of popular DC characters like Martian Manhunter or John Constantine or Constantine, I don't know. It feels like a way to ease the DC readers into this story that isn't really anywhere close to mainstream superheroes comics at the time. This in particular isn't necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes it does feel like fan service, even though for the most part I thought it was done pretty well. So yeah, the only bad thing about this volume is the fact that it's not quite as amazing as the rest of the series, which isn't really the worst weakness, I guess. Oh, and one more thing actually, kind of, and that is the art. Because I don't think the art is bad, only that as someone who is used to modern comic book art, it feels a bit dated in places, especially at the beginning, so I had to get used to it before I can actually start enjoying it. But again, the other aspects of the book were solid enough that this isn't really a big problem for me, but it might be for others. Okay, now to the rest of the good stuff. First, the main character himself. While he's not my favorite character of the series, he's still a really good character, otherwise the series wouldn't be so good. What I liked about the characterization in this volume in particular is how clear and obvious it is, especially considering how a lot of the other aspects of the book are still not too sure of themselves. Dream's characterization is obvious. In just a few pages we know exactly what kind of character he is, while the limitations that the story puts on him enables the story to still preserve some kind of mystery of who he really is as a whole. And his character arc is pretty clear-cut as well. I appreciate character arcs that are more subtle, but my favorite ones are the ones where the characters can like really change, and you can see the changes manifest, and most importantly, you can see why the changes happen in a way that makes sense and isn't really forced. So yeah, it's perfect in that regard. Another thing that I want to highlight is the writing. Not really the plot, which is perfectly good and had a lot of well-planted seeds for future stories, but it kinda suffers from the still trying to figure things out problem I mentioned earlier. I'm talking about the actual words on the pages, the narration in particular. I'm not saying that writers who only write comic books are bad with narrations, but Neil is someone who also writes novels, and it shows in the narration. They're all written in a very compelling way without taking up too much space, which is just perfect in my opinion. The narration is really good, basically. It adds a lot to the story without cluttering the pages too much, if that makes sense. And next, I want to talk about 2 specific issues in this volume that are just so way above the quality of everything else. It's basically 2 issues that are in my top 5 of all Sandman issues, if that makes sense. I don't remember what number of issues they are, but the first one is titled 24 Hours, and the second one is titled The Sound of Her Wings. 24 Hours is simply one of the most horrific and like visceral stories that I've ever read. It is just, I don't know, traumatic. Like the first word that comes to my mind after I first read it is just, it's traumatic. It is, yeah, I'm not gonna spoil too much, but it involves Dream and the character who I consider to be the main villain of the volume, so this will probably be the climax of the season. And I don't know how they're gonna do it justice, because parts of what makes it so good are things that are exclusive to the format of graphic novels, like the art and the narration. but we will see. If they can do it justice, then yeah, it's gonna be so good. And the second amazing issue is The Sound of Her Wings, the final issue of the volume. It's like the coda of the volume. It introduced my favorite character in the entire story, which is Death, Dream's older sister. This issue is amazing because of how different it is compared to everything before it. Like, for example, it is visually so bright when most of the things before are visually darker. And yet there's still this bleak undertone because, well, she is Death. No matter how cheery she is still Death. And the issue shows the many different impacts that Death can have on different people, even on her own brother Dream. And this issue is important to complete Dream's character arc, and it also makes me think about my own death and the death of my loved ones. It makes me think a lot of stuff, but it also brings some kind of weird, comforting thoughts about it that is very difficult to articulate. But yeah, it's just an amazing story and an amazing introduction to the character as well. Yeah, overall, while Sandman Volume 1 is the weakest part of Sandman, it is not perfect, but it's still a good enough story that anyone who is intrigued by the premise should read it, especially in preparation for the TV show. Because if they do justice to the story, the show is gonna be a hit, and the author is involved in the production of the show, so let's just say that I like the chances of that. If you wanna see more reviews of The Sandman, definitely subscribe and stick around because I'm gonna do reviews for pretty much all of them as a lead up to the TV show. So yeah, thanks for watching.